With articles like this one out of Bloomberg, where they're so arrogant, they come out and say, and there's another one here in Forbes, you got to ask the communist Chinese if you could have a government shutdown, and they brag, checkmate, America's occupied by financial and foreign interest, just like a third world country under gunboat diplomacy. So if we point out that the Panama Canal, all our infrastructure, General Motors, everything's being transferred to China in a dirty trick by the globalists who need a home, and that you know, Maurice Strong and all of them live over there now. If we point out this double cross with the IMF, the World Bank, the Saudi Arabians, the communist Chinese, who already dictate what movies we can put out, just like the Saudi Arabians. I don't like Israel dictating some of what we do. I'm not defending Israel, but the point is, no one ever talks about the Chi-Coms or the Saudis, and they're the ones always giving me problems. They're the ones always coming down on me, folks. Okay, they're the ones who are teamed up with the big banks and these other globalist and European interests. And it's a bunch of criminals over all these countries teamed up doing it. So we're going to skip this network break. This is so important to give Dr. Corsi more time. But my point is, if we point out Obamacare is a shutdown of America, it's the free market shutdown. There is no shutdown of the abominable occupied federal government. They're not even shutting down all the core stuff. It is literally a way to make you think that you only survive because of them. And it makes them the center of attention. And this is how they've taken over Brazil, Nigeria, Greece. And notice when Greece gave them all the money they wanted, they imploded more. Notice when France did this, they imploded more. Notice when Spain did it, they imploded more. And now the bankers are going to do it to the Western world. This is so historical, and I wanted Dr. Corsi's take on that and where he sees us historically, because I see an awakening, but at the same time, if we don't explain to people that this is a globalist takeover, a war against sovereign nations and individual wealth and private property, if we don't point that out to everyone and point out that Obamacare is a takeover of America and is designed to wreck us and drive us into the welfare rolls as they make tens of millions go on part-time, the employer mandate, 63% of doctors say they're going to retire early. My dad is. I mean, it is just, my dad has been working another 10 years. He loves being a physician. Everybody he knows is getting ready to retire. That's the plan. So that's a lot I just said, Dr. Corsi. Some stations like XM only joined us in the last 2 hours. I wanted to recap where we're at. You've heard the compendium of what I've said. I mean, I know you're going to agree with me because I've read your writings and your research. This is a fact. But you and I know this. We need the public to know this and then get it out to everybody else, because from a military and historic and political perspective, when we phrase this right, that it's a foreign occupation, which it is, by suits and UN bureaucrats above the law, backed up by the Chi-Coms, it's over. We've got to get that message out that they're holding us hostage to implode us, not holding us hostage to fix the economy. And the only way out is to run up the flag of, you know, the black flag of no surrender and charge, damn the maneuvers, go straight at them. Dr. Corsi.
Well, I agree with you, Alex. I think we're at a critical point here with the shutdown. I mean, if Obamacare goes into effect, it is clearly going to wreck the economy. It's clearly designed to wreck the economy. That's what people don't understand. The Democrats had planned this from the beginning to destroy the economy. And by the way, most of the Republicans went along with it. Now, what's happened as it gets closer to implementation and people are realizing how disastrous Obamacare is. I mean, we list the disasters. It's making America part-time employed. It's going to have death panels. I mean, I began to call it Obamacide, as in homicide. I mean, the quality of medical care is going to deteriorate rapidly. The powers that be, the elite, know this. It's not designed to give universal medical care. There's going to be as many uninsured under this bill as there were before. It's just going to deteriorate the quality of health care and put it under government control. So I agree with you. The only thing to do at this point is to fight it, not to agree with it.
That's why SNY has a nightly show devoted entirely to New York sports. Because who cares about coverage from Orange County when you...
Hey, Doc, I think something launched on your computer. I had that happen earlier to me. Go ahead. You're back, sir.
I'm back, okay.
Please continue. The only thing to do is...
The only thing to do is to fight this and to let the government shut down. The idea of a last-minute fix or this is a game of chicken at this point. The president thinks that he'll get his way by refusing to negotiate with the Republicans. Finally, I think the Tea Party conservatives have gotten through to the Republicans in the House that they're going to lose their seats. They're going to be voted against. It's suicide to vote for Obamacare. Even John Boehner and Mitch Cantor have finally got the message. So a showdown now is inevitable, and I think a showdown is the only possible thing that might save the country from Obamacare. What Obama's counting on is that the Republicans will lose their nerve and that he can beat the drums with the mainstream media, causing panic that the government's shutting down. The truth is, if the government shuts down, most Americans won't feel it at all. And at most, it's going to be a minor inconvenience. Although I'm sure the Obama people will try to make it as painful as possible. Delays at airports, other closings of public parks, etc. But I think Americans are going to feel after a short period of time that it's better to suffer this inconvenience and to fight a fight now against Obamacare, because if Obamacare gets funded at this point, the possibility of repealing it at a later point is uncertain. And if the forces that want Obamacare in power, and it's not just Democrats, Republicans, I think it's the bankers, it's those who want to control the American economy. If they win at this point, if Obamacare gets funded and they get through this hurdle, don't count on having another chance to repeal it.
And of course, this is Cloward and Piven 101 here, Dr. Corsi. Explain to people what Cloward and Piven is.
Well, Cloward and Piven there were two sociologists who were at Columbia when Obama was supposedly there. And their whole idea was to create a communist state in which we would move to eliminate private property, go to a collectivism of a Soviet-style government, only by collapsing capitalism. And their whole idea, Cloward and Piven, of collapsing capitalism was to so pile the demands on a social welfare system that eventually the system went bankrupt. And we're right at that point right now. We can't really absorb the costs of Obamacare. You're going to find, again, Obamacare is a tax. That's another thing I think people have got to really understand. This is a tax, and it's designed to be punitive. You're going to find young people who are looking at $300 a month if they want to get insured under Obamacare, when they don't need to have this kind of insurance at this point in their lives. You're not going to find more people being insured. It's not going to happen. You're going to find doctors who want to leave. The healthcare exchanges aren't going to work. The only people who are going to go to the exchanges are sick and are going to look for insurance that they couldn't otherwise get, which, by the way, will bankrupt the insurance companies who participate. This thing is a disaster in every scope, but people got to understand it was meant to be a disaster. The whole purpose of Obamacare was to implode the American health system.
And that's right. And Obama, as you know, earlier this year hired the head French economist that helped destroy their economy and bring 100+% taxes on the middle class to collectivize everyone, because the top socialists, it all turned out, had Swiss bank accounts and were above the law. And they didn't even get in trouble. This is an authoritarian takeover. They've doubled the number of people on food stamps. It's set to double again the next 5 years. Obama has been incredibly successful. He has devastated, with the globalists and the big banks, the country, and the country's on life support right now, and Obamacare is the lethal injection.
And notice that members of Congress are exempted, and their staffs exempted from Obamacare. That should tell everybody something. And even in this shutdown, guess who's going to get paid? Members of Congress and their staff. So, the pain being inflicted by Obamacare is on the American people, and the goal is to destroy the middle class. And if we just take a perspective, it used to be that everybody got health insurance who was employed. You got it as part of your employment package. Today, we've deteriorated the system so far that not only are you not getting health insurance where you work, your work is being turned into part-time labor. so you can avoid having to have the health insurance paid by the employer. And the whole structure is designed to be a warfare against employment, pushing more and more people into the hands of government dependency, more and more people in the hands of food stamp and other forms of government checks. And the government's now going to try to, the Obama administration is going to try to scare everybody that if we don't allow the federal government to continue operating in its huge bloated structure, disaster is going to occur. I remind everybody that when the sequester hit, there wasn't any disaster, and there won't be any disaster in the government shutdown.
Sure, Dr. Corsi, let me throw this out there at you. The Weekly Standard pointed out something we've pointed out before. Obamacare website quietly deleted references to free health care. They'd done this in emails they were sending out a few months ago, but now it's off the site. Before it said, where can I get free or low-cost care in my community? Now it says, where can I get low-cost care in my community? What about what Mitch McConnell says, that, oh, let's let it go through, it's so horrible it'll destroy them? No, I mean, their constituents, God bless them, are so gullible and uninformed that they're going to end up blaming those of us. I mean,
you don't let a train wreck happen so you can blame it on the other side. You try to prevent the train wreck from happening. It's unpredictable. If Obamacare fails, the opponents of Obamacare are just going to get blamed anyway. We'll be blamed. I'll be blamed. You'll be blamed because we opposed it. We criticized it. Mitch McConnell is wrong. The only thing to do right now is to take a principled stand on this and draw a line and tell the international bankers, tell the federal government, we're tired of it. Let's go back to printing our own money, get rid of the Federal Reserve. A crisis is coming. There's no doubt that this whole system of debt is going to implode. It'll implode the minute the Federal Reserve stops buying our own debt. And there's a point at which we can't continue buying our own debt, and the government knows it.
And instead of them holding us hostage and maneuvering us into a thing where they're in control, when they pull the plug either way, they're the authors of the whole thing. They're the ones that get in trouble, not capitalism and free market and those of us that warned, like you and Ron Paul, for 35 years. We should get medals, not be blamed for it, so we better explain all this right now so they get the blame and we don't get basically scapegoated.
And also, look, the forces that be, the bankers, the insurance companies, and insurance companies want this, by the way. They funded Democrats very heavily on this. Obama wants this desperately. Let's not let them have it. Let's destroy. If the New World Order forces want Obamacare so badly, that alone is a sign it ought to be destroyed, because its intention is more control, more serfdom, more destruction of the private economy, less income and less control for people in their own hands, and forcing everything into a government health system. We've got to draw a line, and if it's at all possible to destroy Obamacare now, let's do that. And by the way, a shutdown on the government, I think I'd love to see people understand after 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, that we don't need this much government anyway. Why not shut it down? Why not shut massive portions of it down permanently?
Exactly. We should send the House Republicans that are doing a good job thank you notes here. I mean, I can't wait to have the feds off my back. I wish they'd all go to hell. I'm sorry. Stay there, Dr. Corsi. We're going to come back and shift gears into your book that just came out today.
The Alex Jones channel is the official page of the Info War. But don't miss what's happening on our other channels. The Info Warrior, with the week's best videos. Prison Planet Live, where Paul Joseph Watson gives his expert analysis. And keep up with the rest of the Info Wars crew on our other pages. All of our videos are available to repost for educational purposes. See the sidebar of the Alex Jones channel for the subscription links. And remember, you can always find our videos in the highest quality by becoming a member of PrisonPlanet.tv.
My friends, if you've read The Road to Serfdom, written decades ago, if you've studied history, the reason I get angry and start almost hyperventilating on air is The IMF and the World Bank are on record going in and giving loans to third world countries at loan sharking rates, and in internal agreements, they only get it so the country has to agree that they won't pay it back, and then a piece is given to the dictator or given to the corrupt Congress or the corrupt parliament, and $1 billion loan in Nigeria becomes 40+ billion in debt. You pay 40 billion over the years on a $1 billion loan. And they gave terms to Greece and others that they knew would hammer the economy. Joseph Stiglitz left as the chief economist of the World Bank in 2002, and 2,000 pages of documents got leaked to Joseph Stiglitz. They declared national security on them, but not before he put out 100+ pages on my show. The BBC Newsnight put it out. He was on my show the same day. The same day. He said, I can come on your show once it airs. It was airing over in England 6 hours ahead, a tape of it, you know, that he'd shot, the equivalent of Nightline, Greg Palast, while he was on my show live, breaking it in 2002, where they planned to do this to America. That's the thing. These are criminals. They are the ones that lobby for welfare and socialism, so they always have a kept group that will riot. They call it the IMF riot. They have all these actuary battle plans. We always knew this, but it leaked. And Stiglitz, when he's come on the show probably 5 times, always says, I did not leak that, by the way. Do not say I leaked that. Okay, it just got leaked the same time you quit and went public about it. But I do admire Stiglitz, even though I don't agree with some of his politics, because he honorably quit. This is the most immoral thing you can do. Just like carbon taxes, double on the third world would kill 1 billion people in a decade, Lord Monckton's numbers show. And his numbers are dead on. This is eugenics. This is command and control. All of our ancestors, one way or another, came here from Europe, if you come from Europe or even other nations after that, in the second and third waves, because you weren't allowed to be a doctor if your family wasn't doctors. You weren't allowed to own land if your family didn't own lands. You weren't allowed to even be a blacksmith if your family wasn't a blacksmith. You were kept where you were. And why do you think Mexico's gone from 10 million people to 30 million in the last 20 years? They turned all of southern and central Mexico, west and east, and into UN biospheres. My dad in the 80s looked at buying land down there when I'd never heard of biosphere. We went down to Mexico and looked at rich Europeans, Americans, and Mexicans buying Mayans' land that they'd been on for thousands of years, and you were only allowed to build certain things on it. And there were UN signs, UN brochures, and my dad said, I don't want to buy land. I remember my mom and my dad in Cancun after we'd driven out, and I'm going back to Dr. Corsi, after we'd driven back from the middle of nowhere on the coast down there, and he said, I don't want to buy land they took from farmers and fishermen. Years later, I go to Cozumel and other places. There's no fishermen fishing. They're not allowed to under it. Only big trawlers are allowed to come by. So they've all got to move. Can't grow corn anymore. Can't fish anymore. Big trawlers are only allowed to get the fish because they pay the Mexican government. It's all Agenda 21. It's feudalism. It's serfdom. So they all got to go to Mexico City to be slaves, to then bring down America's wages and make us slaves. Just like China's used as a race to the bottom that Ross Perot warned us about. And Dr. Jerome Corsi, amazing new book, just finished it this weekend, Who Really Killed Kennedy, already shooting up the New York Times bestseller list, just coming out today. 50 years later, stunning new revelations about the JFK assassination. It's available at InfoWarsStore.com. And the reason it's so important is that it gets into who controls it and how it was a coup over America by the very same special interests that now want a coup over any form of wealth. They want you poor by design. It is such a crime. I love wealth. I love when I see somebody who's successful or with a beautiful wife or beautiful kids, I admire them. These people and the folks that serve them hate your wealth. They hate your success. And they're enemies of humanity, folks. And this is a philosophy throughout history. Are you for prosperity and admiring the virtuous, or are you gang-related, gang mentality, thug mentality, organized crime mentality? Dr. Corsi, I'm ranting. I want you to finish up on the whole banking takeover that we just mentioned and what I just talked about, this radical transformation. This is not rhetoric. This is really happening. America's going into the guillotine right now. And then segue in the 25 minutes we've got left into your new book.
Well, it's basically the background of the book. I mean, I point out that the Kennedy assassination, which I've studied now for 50 years. I knew the Kennedys. I was, back with my father around. He was a labor lobbyist in the 50s in Washington. I go back to the McClellan Committee hearings, and it was a coup d'etat that killed Jack Kennedy, engineered by the highest powers in America and covered up by those same powers, including CIA, including Lyndon Johnson, in conjunction with the mob. And going back to the McClellan Committee hearings, which was the start of Jack Kennedy's real rise to national prominence, that was the hearings against the mob going into the Teamsters Union. One of the key families that I write about that people don't really know much about, the Elkins crime family in the West, warned Kennedy that he was going to be killed and that the assassination would occur from a plot of a high-powered rifle with a scope in a tall building on a motorcade. Even the day Jack Kennedy awoke in Fort Worth on November 22nd, 1963, he was talking about how easy it would be to kill him that day. Kennedy knew an assassination attempt was in the works, and he also knew it was being organized from within the government.
Continue.
Well, as I go, the attempt to kill Jack Kennedy, there were 3 attempts to kill Jack Kennedy in November of '63. First 2 failed, one in Chicago and one in Tampa. Dallas succeeded.
And it's important that it was a Secret Service agent in Chicago that stopped the first one.
Correct. And he tipped off the Kennedys. The plot stopped because Kennedy didn't go to Chicago. In Tampa, Kennedy had to go to Tampa, and the security was beefed up. But in Dallas, they thought, everybody trying to protect Kennedy thought it was raining that day, which it was in Fort Worth when the day started. By the time they flew the short 10-minute flight to Dallas, the rain stopped and the bubble top was taken off the car, which is the reason the squad in place to do the assassination, the shooters went ahead. They didn't stand down. But what my book addresses is not, I name the shooters. I say who was there and how they got there. But the critical point is the forces who put them there. And I say Jack Kennedy started signing his death warrant the day he fired Allen Dulles from the head of the CIA in the Bay of Pigs, because Allen Dulles was trying to trick Jack Kennedy into using a naval airstrike from a carrier offshore in this failed CIA invasion that was not a popular uprising, and Jack Kennedy wouldn't do it. Jack Kennedy said no to the CIA. He fired Allen Dulles. And of course, I trace Allen Dulles and his brother, John Foster Dulles, who was Secretary of State under Eisenhower, back to before the war when they were working at Harriman Brothers' firm in Wall Street, and they were financing Hitler. So what people have to understand, we financed Hitler. We put Hitler into place in Wall Street. And also in that firm were the 2 patriarchs of the Bush family, Prescott Bush and George Herbert Walker. And they were involved in funding Hitler too. The Bushes and the Dulleses were running a Nazi bank in New York, Union Bank, that FDR closed down in the first days of World War II after Pearl Harbor. But Dulles stayed in the game. Dulles went to Bern, Switzerland for the OSS.
And by the way, the word I've got is exactly the CIA and the people who'd been in OSS and worked with the Nazis. They were the recipients of lots of the Nazi hoard that was the wealth of Europe, and that's the shadow wealth that's been funding the New World Order since then.
In fact, in 1943, as I point this out in the book and go in detail, starting in 1943, when the Nazis in the know knew that they were going to lose the war, Martin Bormann, who was number 2 to Hitler, with Allen Dulles, took billions, today it'd be trillions, of the plundered wealth, the gold from the Jews in the concentration camp, the bullion, the stolen art, the treasuries that had been looted. And Allen Dulles and Martin Bormann invested that money into the U.S. stock market through agents in Switzerland. A lot of our post-war boom was funded by Nazi money. The other place they put it was in Argentina. The Nazis, it's critical people understand, the Nazis who escaped Germany escaped because we, Allen Dulles, the OSS, we allowed them to escape. We facilitated their escape.
30,000 in one wave.
And we brought over our Operation Paperclip, at least 20,000, I estimate, scientists, including, people like Werner von Braun, who did the V2 program. He headed our intercontinental missile program, and he headed our space program for the man on the moon. He was building the V2 Terra rocket with Jewish slave labor in the concentration camp, a missile that was able to handle an atomic weapon if the Nazis had ever developed one.
Well, look at Goddard. Look at all of them.
And also the whole agency, the whole Gehlen, not Gestapo, that formed a pillar of our CIA.
Reinhard Gehlen?
Yes. We took that whole organization and made it one of the cornerstones of the CIA when it was built on the Nazi foundation. See, what people don't understand, I think, Alex, is the New World Order comes from National Socialism. National Socialism, the Nazis were a leftist party. They believed in a partnership between government and business for lying wars, rearmament in order to promote the economy, multinational business. They opposed the communists because the communists wanted to eliminate private property. Nazis wanted to enhance private property. They wanted to put it in the hands of an international elite that was going to...
In fact, for those that don't know, Hitler had his own model of the UN he wanted to set up, his own League of Nations, and they were even planning on how to feed people food that was tainted and stuff so they would slowly die because they calculated people would resist a frontal assault. So they even had a plan to depopulate the earth. And the British eugenicists and other eugenicists, though they funded and helped set up the Nazis, for those that don't know, double-crossed them, but then adopted their entire program. The 68 Gun Control Act is the Nazi Gun Control Act from Nuremberg. That's on record.
The first universal health care that we're fighting today with Obamacare was put in place by the Nazis.
The Olympics, the modern Olympics, created by Adolf Alois Hitler. He drew the ring symbol, the Volkswagen. He designed it. I mean, basically, when you realize that most of our world is basically Nazi, but it's not saying they're Nazis, it's that they took the Nazi model, mixed it with the British Empire model, and that's the New World Order.
This is the New World Order, and it was a Nazi idea to have a New World Order, and the Dulleses and the Bushes embraced it. And they brought it back, and they formed it as the cornerstone of our post-World War II, Cold War, which people have got to understand also the Dulleses, the military, what Eisenhower wore in the military-industrial complex, these are all Nazi formulations. How, business...
You know what Hitler's other pamphlet book's name was? It was New World Order, and they even had anti-Nazi cartoons in World War II showing Hitler going, I want my New World Order.
Right, it was... New World Order is a Nazi concept. And Jack Kennedy would not fight these lying CIA wars. He wouldn't do it. Jack Kennedy also didn't put troops into Laos. Again, you had the CIA with people like Lansdale, the CIA, who wanted to develop this guerrilla, a U.S. Army that could fight in a guerrilla war, asymmetric army like we have today. And they wanted no-bid contracts because before, beginning of Vietnam, before that, if we had one weapon system, multiple companies built it. But after Vietnam, Bell built all the helicopters, and they got no bid contracts.
Hey, let's go further. You take the current head of the Senate here in Texas, David Dewhurst, Lieutenant Governor. He's on record working with Klaus Barbie and the CIA in the 70s in Central and South America, and he doesn't even deny it. I mean, that's how many of these guys there are. He was trained by Klaus Barbie. And for those that don't know who Klaus Barbie was, he was top SS.
And what I put out in the book is the model for coup d'etat with a patsy and an assassination was developed in the 1950s by the CIA, and they worked with Edward Bernays, who I knew, head of public relations. There was a banana company, the United Fruit Company, and the head of state from Guatemala was returning land to the people. So the CIA Edward Bernays, Eisenhower decided they would have a coup d'etat. They created one of these false flag bogus armies that they invaded Colombia with, CIA mercenaries, called it freedom fighters. They deposed the head of state. They got a new head of state they didn't like. They killed him. They assassinated him. It was the palace guard that supposedly shot this Armas, the head of the state. Nobody saw him do it. And they said, well, Armas took the rifle and killed himself. So you had the patsy dead, nobody to be blamed, a coup d'etat engineered by the CIA. And that model was the model that Dulles and the CIA used to put Lyndon Johnson in the White House with the complicity of the mob.
Incredible book, all documented. I've read it, reading it. I already know everything in it, but the way you put it together is so historical. I'll guarantee you most people out there do not know 10% of what's in this book. And when I brag and say I know it's all accurate, it's that I've done deep research for this from like 50 books. This is all in one place.
It confirms what you've been saying. This is the, Alex, it confirms what I wrote in Who Really Killed Kennedy. What that whole argument is the basic origin of the New World Order.
This is the book, finally one that isn't just about Kennedy being killed, but ties into why they did it, who they are. And let's go further. You know about the Vichy French, the 2-year infiltration by the Nazis, how the French really stood down, the Maginot Line. That's how Hitler was able to take over France and only force out the Dunkirk Expeditionary Force, the British, because they'd already paid them off. That was the model of paying off the Iraqis to stand down both times. That's the model of infiltrating. They have Delta Force buying off all the local police chiefs in the U.S. right now.
And what I show is, okay, Lyndon Johnson was happy. The Kennedys were going to expose Lyndon Johnson's corruption. And they had the article set to go in Life magazine and the Bobby Baker scandal where Johnson, with one of his pages, was running a prostitution ring out of the Senate. They were working in vending machines with the mob in Chicago, putting them on army bases and other army contracts.
Stay there, yeah. It's well known LBJ ran a lot of whores. I've even stayed in the hotel room. It's ridiculous, right downtown Austin. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gate, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. Get your Pro Pure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139. I haven't even gotten to second command of country's nuclear arsenal is suspended in the United States. They claim for an investigation of gambling. Yeah, right. Our intel's there's missing nukes at a Dyess Air Force Base, and we have that from very high-level sources, and no one ever denied it or responded to it, even though we called them more than 10 times and sent emails. But finishing up with the Kennedy situation, this book explains the entire history of it, why it happened, and ties it into the coup d'etat over this country. Who Really Killed Kennedy? Available at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. And they are just harassing companies all over the U.S., shutting down factories, harassing doctors, even doctors that have small clinics. They're shutting down industry everywhere. That's exactly what the Nazis did, not just in Germany, but everywhere else. They shut down everybody but party members. So it's really a takeover of the economy. I think America's waking up to this, though, Dr. Corsi. We see the indicators of it everywhere.
Well, I think so, too. I mean, it ties in to what you've been saying, Alex. I mean, Lyndon Johnson was happy to use the false flag in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which never happened, to fight the war and to allow the Vietnam War to be in the control of the CIA, also running drugs at the same time. CIA has always worked with the mob in running drugs. In fact, one of the assassins I point out, who was found in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963, was a well-known Corsican international assassin who went back to the attempts to kill de Gaulle, who was helping with the mob and the CIA with the drug trafficking in Vietnam. There's another reason the military and the CIA and big business wanted Vietnam to be fought. Huge amount of drugs were going to be
And
brought.
by the way, de Gaulle was also trying to be president of France as well and not being part of NATO and wanted his own nuclear weapons. That's why they tried to kill him.
Of course, and also it ties into, as you said, the current, I bring it forward because Kennedy was also going to eliminate the Federal Reserve. He was going to break up the CIA. Instead, what we have is a world that the Nazis would have loved to have lived in, with Germany heading the EU, not a shot fired, a regional government controlled by Germany in the EU, transatlantic partnership, the NSA listening to every conversation in America, and a huge welfare state. It's a Nazi model. And then wars. No one should be surprised. Saddam Hussein, no weapons of mass destruction. Of course, it was a CIA lie from the beginning. And it's going on today. Assad using the chemical weapons, more CIA lies. John Kerry beating the war drums, the Secretary of State, when in fact the UN says it was the rebels. When in fact, why are we going to support the Al-Qaeda and these jihadi mercenaries in Syria? There's no good guys. We've already supported them in Benghazi and in Libya to defeat Gaddafi. We're on the wrong side of the Muslim world fighting with Al-Qaeda. We've become Al-Qaeda, and it's all a CIA lie. These wars are fought not for U.S. interests, but to benefit the Saudi Arabians.
And it's a war on the individual and the free market because we're a threat to them. Stay there. Are we choosing our own destiny, or has it been pre-selected for us?
As we've moved through history, every great leader has had to understand the potential of information.
Billions of dollars have been spent, privately and publicly, looking at how to tap into your psyche.
From compulsory state education to the Hollywood media brainwashing machine, we are kept in perpetual bondage to the ideas that shape our actions.
When somebody obscures that feedback loop between you observing and testing it out and verifying it, they can take total control of your awareness.
All of this is happening so fast, you need to be ahead of the game.
How to engineer the opinion of the American people so that they would not only endorse but demand a war.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit.
State of Mind, because there's a war on for your mind. Get your copy of State of Mind, the movie, at Infowars.com. And remember, every order at InfoWarsStore.com receives a free citizen rulebook. Dr. Jerome Corsi's with us for 5 more minutes. Who Really Killed Kennedy 50 years later? Just probably the best book I've ever read on the Kennedy assassination because it ties into everything else. And it's all the real info, too, because I'm quite a buff on the subject, obviously, hosting the show over 18 years. And this is something I would give people that were doubters. This will wake people up. Going back to Dr. Corsi, sir, in the 4 minutes we've got left, we're obviously in a historic moment. It's obviously very creepy what the bureaucrats and regulators are doing. What do you recommend everybody do to really turn the tide? And I think we have a chance to beat these people if we take action. But what is the lay of the battlefield right now?
Well, I think this, we're coming up on a government shutdown, and a government shutdown, people should, encourage the representatives in Congress, go ahead and shut the government down. The government wants you to feel it's going to be so painful, everything so awful is going to happen. They want us to beg to keep the government open, not to shut it down, even at the pain of imposing Obamacare. There's another scare tactic to get the government over the final hurdle to where Obamacare cannot be defunded. This is a critical battle. People should be happy to see the battle going forward. All the economic pain we're suffering from Obamacare, the part-time jobs, the wrecking of private insurance, the increased costs of medical care, these were intended by the people who wrote the legislation. That's the hard thing to get your mind around. It was intended to wreck private health care. It was intended to send people more into the arms of government dependency. And the only way we're going to break it is to tell the government, no, we won't do it. We're not going to accept more debt. You know, go back to John Kennedy. It's time to break up the CIA into 1,000 pieces. We should never have fought in Vietnam. It was a false flag from the beginning. We've got to break up the Federal Reserve like Jack Kennedy would have done, start printing our own money with the Treasury, and tell these banksters we're not going to put more power into this new world order lie.
You know, it seems like you've gotten more bold recently, Dr. Corsi, and I would say you're on fire. Is it because you sense that the quickening, the crossroads, the jump point, the event horizon is arriving?
Yeah, if we've got a government in place that is willing to do a false flag in Syria on chemical weapons, lying about it, in order to put us more in the hands of al-Qaeda and jihadi mercenaries in Syria, if that's who our government wants us to fight with, if this final pushes on with Obamacare, if we're now at $17 trillion and about not to be able to buy any more of our debt, the only thing left is for these New World Order people to run naked to the finish line. And they're going to try to scare people into doing this. They're going to try to create such a crisis, everybody's going to feel they're going to lose everything. The only way you lose everything is if you give this government more power. If the government's going to crash, let it crash. Let it, you know, if the bureaucrats, all million of them that are employed by us, go home and don't ever come back, I don't think anybody's going to really miss them. I'll be happy if they start with the IRS and keep them home permanently. And then how about, you know, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, you can't have the TSA. Yeah, well, while they have the TSA, make the airports more difficult, the NSA is going to be working overtime to listening to anybody who complains. Alex, we're at a critical point, and it's time now, when the Democrats are looking more and more like Republicans, let them all know that if they don't fight Obamacare, if they don't shut the government down, stop the spending, get rid of the Federal Reserve, that we're on to it. And otherwise, we wake up in the camps, and there is no alternative.
Wow.
Because that's where it's headed.
Now you can watch Alex Jones live at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
You can also browse the network, the InfoWars Nightly News,
and over 60 movies and documentaries all together in one place.
You can watch the Alex Jones Radio Show live as it happens.
So check it out, Infowars.com/show.